got a GPU as old as the GTX 780 is going to be rough in 2024. However though, that doesn't necessarily mean this GPU's e-waste, as from what I'm about to show you, this old Kepler graphics card can indeed play some slightly newer games. If I'm being honest with you, my GTX 780 is a bit of a Frankenstein graphics card. You may think it's an MSI GPU, but in fact the PCB is an EVGA, more specifically a superclocked 780. And yeah, it's just a bit dinged up. It looks like it's been through the ringer a bit because it's just all battered and bruised. And in fact, after my benchmarking, this GPU did in fact fail on me. And when I tried to shoot some short form content featuring this 780, the day after I did all my benchmarking, my PC wasn't displaying out an image, and as we know from graphics cards, that's never a good sign. And the PC works totally fine with any other GPU, so yeah, this GPU is just totally balked out. But despite that, before it decided to not be a graphics card anymore, how does it get on? So to see how this aging lad gets on, I've tested it at 1080p in my Ryzen 5 7600 testing PC, which has 32GB of 6200 MHz CL32 DDR5 memory, a Western Digital SN770 2TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD, and an MSI X670E Tomahawk motherboard. I maxed out the power slider purely to get this GPU to be stable, as it was showing signs of instability before it eventually balked out, and I've used the latest driver at the time of testing, which is probably like around 3 years old, because it's a Kepler graphics card. I'm going to start off with an easy game on the GTX 780 with Fortnite on the Performance API. 311 FPS will do quite nicely here, with a decent 1% low. So realistically, if you had a GPU as old as this, the Performance API is a massive saviour in Fortnite, and it seems that the lack of driver development for the past 3 years on the 780 is not going to hinder your performance in this title. Where it will probably hinder your performance is Cyberpunk 2077. On the low preset, 31 FPS is, well, you're going to have to take it on a 780 with a relatively decent 1% low as well. So if you really wanted to play Cyberpunk and you had something like a 780, it is playable, but it's far from ideal. Esports games seem to shine on older Kepler graphics cards, with Counter-Strike 2 getting just south of 200 frames per second on average, with quite a healthy 1% low as well. Counter-Strike does suffer from some 1% low struggles, I'd like to say, but on the whole here, if you've got a relatively modern CPU, well, anything made in the past sort of 10 years, you'll be good to go in Counter-Strike 2. Throwing it back to this classic in Halo Reach on the Master Chief Collection, yet again here, you're going to be totally fine. Enough performance here to drive a 144Hz 1080p monitor will do quite nicely on the original preset. So yeah, if you wanted to play some Halo Reach firefight, I mean the 780 is good enough for it. Setting The Witcher 3 to DirectX 11 for obvious reasons today on the low preset sees really good performance, 66 FPS overall with a relatively decent 1% low in the Novigrad area. Made me quite happy with the performance today. I was expecting much worse on the 780, but here you're getting very playable experience in The Witcher 3, and you could probably get away with some settings tweaking as well. The last esports game up today is Rainbow Six Siege, and performance here is good enough for a 144Hz panel. 152 FPS on average with a very good 1% low, meaning the frame delivery is nice and smooth. So if you wanted to get into some budget competitive gaming in Rainbow Six Siege, the 780 is good enough for it. If someone told me a 780 would have ran Spider-Man Remastered, I probably would have laughed, to be honest, but it sure does start it. And it runs it, kind of. If you consider 38 FPS on average with a pretty horrid 1% low of 18 playable, yeah, the 780 Ti can play this game, but yeah, it's far from ideal. And last up is a classic with Skyrim Special Edition. 60 FPS for both the 1% low and average frame rate means the 780 is going to have absolutely zero issues here. You could raise this to the Ultra preset to get more performance, as Skyrim is locked to 60 frames per second because Bethesda don't know how to code a proper engine. So yeah, if you wanted to play some Skyrim, an old Kepler card like the 780 is more than doable. On the whole, 1080p performance on the 780 isn't too bad if you consider its age. Do bear in mind this GPU is no longer supported by Nvidia, it doesn't support DirectX 12 at a feature level, and it's just really old, at like 11 years old now. But despite that, it will still play games like Spider-Man Remastered and Cyberpunk, depending on your definition of run, because it was more like walked, especially the case of Spider-Man. But hey, it launched the games, and that's a win on a Kepler graphics card, in my opinion. Where this card will excel is older games like Skyrim Special Edition and Halo Master Chief Collection. Here, the lack of driver improvements don't really make a difference. Same goes for the lack of DirectX 12 at a feature level, and you'll be getting pretty decent performance in these games. Skyrim ran well, Halo Master Chief Collection ran well, so no problems there. Also, you'll be getting pretty decent performance in esports titles. Fortnite on the Performance API today, really good performance, getting north of 300 FPS. And then there was Counter-Strike and Rainbow Six Siege, where they had very respectable performance as well. Despite pretty decent performance in the games I tested today, I still cannot recommend any Kepler graphics card in 2024. They're simply too old, they lack driver improvements, and they also lack proper DirectX 12 feature level support. Yes, these will be more of an issue in newer games, but what will remain an issue is their age. They're inefficient for the power that they consume, because this was consuming around 220 watts today, and the other factor of them being old is they're pretty unreliable. Like this GPU that I got was let's be honest, it's a Frankenstein graphics card, and them about as reliable as a modern day Ford. And not only with this graphics card, I have seen loads of Kepler GPUs listed on eBay as parts not working, and that says to me, is this GPU generation really reliable? No, probably not, and that's mainly down to their age. Luckily, this 780 failed after I did all of my benchmarking, and I managed to get my money back as well. The seller was pretty chill about it, and this is why I recommend buying graphics cards from eBay. If something does go wrong within the sort of the window, I guess, I believe it's about 30 days, but if something goes wrong with the graphics card, you should be able to get your money back, as eBay is a pretty buyer-centric platform. But when you pair their pretty questionable reliability and the lack of driver updates and DirectX 12 feature level support, this is why I cannot recommend Kepler graphics cards in 2024. They're simply just too old now. Instead, if you're looking for a graphics card around £40 on the used market, I highly recommend a used RX 470 or 570. These will either come with 4 or 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Either way, it's more than the GTX 780, and they should be getting more performance while using less power and having proper DirectX 12 support. And they're also still somewhat supported by AMD, but not at the same time. It's a really weird story with that. And if you want to see how an RX 470 4GB gets on, there's a video for it up there. With that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.